Hey guys, this is Shelly Wolf, and today I want to go ahead and discuss an issue that I feel is largely overlooked but needs to be addressed, and that would be the neglect of men who are victims of domestic abuse. I really believe that as a society, it's time that we acknowledge that men can be victims too, not only at the hands of other men, but also at the hands of women. It's become a common thing in Western culture where male victims of abuse are often put down and made to feel guilty and ashamed about what they go through because most people they turn to don't take them seriously or assume that the man had done something wrong to deserve it, forcing them to suffer in silence while discouraging others from ever seeking help out of fear of others putting them down for it. According to the NCADV, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence of the United States, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime, while 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them would be harmed or killed. And this is just for the United States alone. Taking a look over at the United Kingdom's statistics on the Office for National Statistics website, an estimated 1.9 million adults aged 16 to 59 years experienced domestic abuse in the last year, according to the year ending March 2017 crime survey for England and Wales. 1.2 million women and 713,000 men. And you have to keep in mind that these are just reported numbers because there are many people out there who fail to report their abuse out of fear of potential consequences, especially with men who are faced with the stigma that what they go through doesn't matter and that any show of emotion is weak and that they are supposed to take it and man up whenever they are faced with hardship. And even more concerning is the lack of acknowledgement of male abuse in other countries like Australia and Canada. When I was doing my search for domestic violence statistics for different countries, I found that many were actually lacking in information regarding victims who were male. Just to go ahead and show you what I mean, I'll go ahead and show you guys, starting with an Australian website. Alright, so here we have the Domestic Violence Prevention Center website for Australia. And before I go ahead and click on any of these links, I just want to go ahead and scroll down over these circles here. So you can see the first one is violence, power, and control, while the second is nonviolence and equality. And now just going ahead and zooming in on this first circle here. So you can see we have all these little sections which are supposed to be like the branches of power and control. And looking at them, we have using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children, using male privilege, using economic abuse, and using coercion and threats. And if you go ahead and take a good look at some of the passages in these circles, you'll notice that each one of them has emphasis on the victims being female, with really no acknowledgement of men other than as the ones dealing the abuse. And going ahead and scrolling down to the second circle, to nonviolence and equality, we have non-threatening behavior, respect, trust and support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, economic partnership, and negotiation and fairness. And with this, it kind of follows a similar pattern to the first circle, where it's very geared towards females. Although the left side, I'd say, is a little bit more neutral, but these here on the right are very female focused. Again, no real acknowledgement of males here. And scrolling back up here, the next page I want to go ahead and show you guys is this here, domestic violence statistics. And this is supposed to be the page for domestic violence statistics. And as you can see, we have this little passage here, and it reads that the vast majority of dangerous, abusive, and violent behavior that occurs in the privacy of people's homes is committed by men against women. Violence against women is now recognized to be a serious and widespread problem in Australia, with enormous individual and community impacts and social costs. And we go ahead and take a look over here at these little key facts. Again, it's very female oriented. There really aren't any statistics here listed that really even mention male victims. I mean, the only time you really see men mentioned are like little booklets like this one. Um, Let me. All right, where it says women are 5 times more likely than men to require medical attention or hospitalization as a result of intimate partner violence and 5 times more likely to report fearing for their lives. And I mean, just the way it's worded, especially with the use of that word more, it just kind of comes off as though if something were to happen to a woman, then it matters more than if the same thing were to happen to a man. And scrolling through the rest of these statistics, there just really isn't any mentioning of men here. And it's pretty disappointing. And I want to go ahead and show you this here. This brings us to the men's section of the website, and here you can clearly see just how biased everything is. I mean, based on some of the titles of these links. Like here at the top, I mean, we have frequently asked questions about men who abuse, getting help for abusive behaviors, what men can do to help stop domestic violence, and of course, not a single link in regards to male victims. I mean, even for this part right here, what about women who use violence? But when we go into this page, I mean, this entire section does nothing but list reasons justifying why women use violence, and completely downplays what male victims go through. I mean, even in this little paragraph here, all it basically talks about is how it's apparently uncommon that men are affected by domestic violence, and how their experience isn't as bad as what women go through. And I just really don't agree with that. I mean, just because a victim is male does not mean it's any less than what a female goes through. I mean, it's just kind of skewered. I also want to go ahead and show you a bit about Canada. Like here, we have the actual government website for Canada, and this is the page where they have information on family violence. And scanning through this again, it's very, very focused around women. I mean, like here, right at the top, it already mentions that women are victims of intimate partner violence more often and more severely than men. And I mean, if you just go ahead and scroll through the rest of it, I mean, you can just see how, just like the Australian site, that this one is also, very centered around women. I mean, like here how it says women are more likely to experience severe spousal violence compared to men. And I mean, this whole little section here is how compared to men, women who are experience spousal violence are twice as likely to report being sexually assaulted, beaten, choked, or threatened, more likely to report higher rates of injury caused by abuse, 40% of female victims compared to 24% of male victims, more likely to experience long-term PTSD-like effects than men, and more likely to report being put down or called names than men. But of course, I mean, not even a number is given for how many men, I mean, throughout this whole thing actually suffer from domestic violence themselves. And I also just want to go ahead and, just scroll to the bottom and show you this little thing, this little note here that estimate should be used with caution. And, after seeing that, it just makes me kind of wonder what that means, and how many men could potentially be underreported simply because they're not being taken seriously. And I just want to say that I'm not trying to downplay what women in violent relationships go through, because I do take domestic abuse very seriously. It's just that I don't agree with the idea of choosing one group over another. I mean, just because a victim is male does not mean that what they experience is any less than what a woman goes through. And no victim deserves to be treated less than another victim just because of a difference in gender. It shouldn't matter if one group is larger than the other, because these are all people who are suffering regardless to that fact. And many men don't even bother to report the abuse because of this stigma that they have geared against them. And honestly, there are some pretty heartbreaking stories out there by male abuse victims, and there's actually a few that I'd like to go ahead and read to you guys just to help give you a better insight into their perspective. The ones I'm going to go ahead and read to you are a few that I've selected from the 1 in 3 campaign website of Australia. These are real posts from real people, and a link to the page where I found them will be provided in the description. In any case, the first one I'm just going to go ahead and read to you guys is John's personal story, who is a father struggling to see his children after leaving an abusive relationship. And his post reads, John's personal story. I have looked after my 2 girls since the youngest was 8 months old. She is 3 now. The mother physically assaulted me and mentally and psychologically tortured me. She refused to co-parent, so I had change over week about at another place to protect my girls from conflict. I have just spent $20,000 in legal fees, as she lied to the court. She had the children that week, and they had been coached so as to exhibit fear towards me. I had orders from a judge several months ago, week about she was on holidays. So another old male judge decided to go with this new report. I had a glowing psychological report, but stats say children need their mother if under 8. So after 2 years, I have now lost my time down to 2 days a fortnight. I work 2 days a week in a good job. I am devastated. What a gross injustice. She said she would destroy me, and the family court is helping her to do this. One wonders in the future when two males have children and they split up, who has the children then? My situation is gender biased. I have been so abused by this woman and no one is listening. My children are now with the mother who twice threatened to kill them. What a disgrace this country is becoming. And then the next one I'm going to read is Jason's personal story, who is another troubled father struggling after leaving a marriage in which he was abused by not only his wife but his father-in-law as well. It reads Jason's personal story. Keep going. That's my best piece of advice to you. Keep going and forgive yourself. I married a domestic abuser when I was 20 years old. For the next 4.5 years, she beat me every time I didn't say things the way she wanted in public and embarrassed her. She would always promise it was the last time, even when I would lay on the floor, crying out for God to forgive her as she kicked my ribs in. It was always the last time. Her father also beat me every time his daughter and I would have a disagreement. All she had to do was cry in front of him, and he'd beat me. The last time he hit me so many times that he broke one of my teeth. I finally had enough of it after they started hitting me in front of the kids, and they were getting old enough to remember. I made the mistake of never reporting the abuse to the police, and the court system favored the mother in our divorce. I was devastated. I went from being a stay-at-home dad and business owner to being destitute, bankrupt, and working a nightmare job to pay child support. I desperately tried to fight to see my children more. It took me a decade to rebuild my life and find a partner who would love me. I spent years racked with guilt for not being able to help my children, but I learned that sometimes the best option is to leave. If I hadn't left, they would have kept their repeated promise of killing me. Worse than that, my children would have grown up thinking it was normal to see me being beaten. At least now there is a chance they might someday know the truth. So forgive yourself and don't be afraid to move on. Sometimes you have to make the best of a bad situation, and the only solution is to save your own life. I tried everything I could, but the system is stacked against men. Sometimes you just have to forgive yourself and keep going. And the last I'm going to read is a post written by a mother who is worried for her adult son and grandchildren who are being alienated from the rest of the family by the wife of her adult son. And it reads, Janines' personal story. My son lived for 13 years with a woman he met as a very young man. The relationship had issues because his partner had been abused as a child and lived in a family where violence was normal. He survived as long as he did in this relationship by living his own separate life whilst still with her. He was promoted at work and moved offshore. Once the separation was finally settled, he announced on Facebook that he and his partner were no longer together. Within days, he was contacted by a woman his age, a New Zealander living in Melbourne. They met and found that they had grown up in the same area. Things moved quickly. He brought her home to meet us pre-Christmas 5 years from now. She spent the first hour of our meeting telling us what an amazing family she had and how she loved them, but did not spend more than a couple hours with them on this trip home. A few weeks later, our son came home to New Zealand for Christmas while she stayed and partied with friends in Australia. Phone calls were worrying. He would enjoy time with his nieces and nephews. Then his phone would ring and his mood would change. Eventually, after a few of these calls, he cut his trip home short and returned to Melbourne and waited at her flat for her to return. Within weeks of Christmas, she became pregnant. Her family greeted this news with suspicion and confusion. They lost the baby, but she became pregnant again very quickly. They came home together a few months before the baby was born. During that visit, there appeared to be a breakdown in the relationship between the woman and her family. Our son claimed the family were saying nasty things about his partner and whispering behind closed doors about them. They did not come back to New Zealand the next Christmas, claiming the child was too young to travel. We had visited when the child was born and found things were more than a little strained. Each time we visited, we were told increasingly horrific stories about this woman's past relationship with both her family and other partners. Stories that indicated she was the subject of continued abuse in all those relationships. When the child was 13 months old, they came home again, this time to go on a Christmas holiday with our entire family. This is the first time we saw a degree of abuse, rough and threatening behavior on her part towards both our son and our grandchild. We were shocked. In the February following that holiday, our son called to say she lashed out and punched him in the head while he was holding the baby. Both he and the baby had bruises on their faces. He had left the house and was calling me while driving towards a work colleague's home where he intended to stay. My advice to him now seems so stupid. I told him to go back and stay and ensure that the baby was safe. I went to Melbourne and tried to get him some legal help. All the advice indicated that he would struggle to get the courts to believe he was the one being abused. That with her history of convincing people that she was the victim, it was likely that he would be blamed. I spoke with her family here in New Zealand, who confirmed for the first time that this woman had a significant illness. That yes, as a child, her birth mother and partner had abused her, but that she had finally been rescued by her father. Sorry about that. Father and stepmother, and had lived with them since she was 9 years old, without any abuse in that family whatsoever. My son, Sorry. My son decided to go back to the relationship as his partner agreed to counseling. She never went, then suddenly they were having another child. After the second child, things became much worse. She attacked our son with knives, locked the little one outside for punishment, and was rough with the new baby. No one was allowed to have anything to do with the new baby, including her son. Bit by bit, over time, she alienated our son from firstly her family and his own. We tricked her into coming back to New Zealand this last Christmas and forced her into psychiatric care. Eventually, they went back to Melbourne, where she has all but completely shut his family out of his life. I am currently the only one he still talks to. He understands, and I agree with him, that if he was to just get out, he would have to leave the kids behind, at least initially. Even if he got 50% custody, the kids would need to spend 50% of their life with an abusive parent without the second parent there to rescue them if things got really bad. So he stays. The most difficult part, oh my god, the most difficult part in all of this is how this woman behaves outside this relationship. She is so convincing to other people about how loving and caring she is, when in reality our son does all the work with the children. Our biggest fear is that she will kill them or the kids before they can get away safely. And, thinking on each of these posts, can you imagine what it must be like to be in their position? I mean, for the two men who suffered from years of abuse from their spouses and then were alienated from their children just because they wanted out of a terrible situation, only to have the system turn around and favor their abusers because it is gender biased. So those men not only have to live missing out on their children's lives, but have to live with the fact that their children are at the mercy of the ones who abused them. Can you really think about being in a situation like that and then have people scoff at you over it? And it's not just the men who are affected. Just like that mother who wrote about her adult son. Her son is forced to stay with his abuser out of fear of the system being stacked against him, and enduring being cut off from his family as a result for his children's sake. I mean, it's stories like these amongst countless others which are why male victims need to be treated with the same acknowledgement as female victims. This is an issue that is spread across Western nations, and something needs to be done about it. Because no victim, man or woman, deserves to be turned away or belittled over what they go through. We should be listening to all people out there who are suffering, no matter what race or gender they are. In any case, I just hope that, this video helps people better understand how serious of a situation this is, and that it encourages people to listen and reach out to those who are being abused regardless to their gender. And for any men who watch this video, for those that feel they may be going through abuse right now. I know that things may seem as though the odds are stacked against you, but it doesn't mean that you have to remain trapped where you are. There are ways that you can cover yourself, like keeping a diary of the abuse you go through if you have if you have someone that you can trust. Don't be afraid to confide in them, because the more people that know what's going on, the better your case may be, especially if you have children involved. There are also helplines out there that do acknowledge male abuse victims, and they do provide resources for those in domestic abuse settings. And I will be providing links in the description for these hotlines in case you're not sure where to find them. And I'll sort each of them by country. And for those of you who agree with the message in this video and want to go ahead and spread awareness about this issue, I do ask that you like and share this video. I also plan to do more videos in the future, both on this subject and many others, so if you would like to just subscribe, that would be great. And if any of you ever have any requests on any topics, don't ever feel afraid to ask, because I would really like to hear what you guys have to say. Anyways, that's all I have to say for now. Again, thank you guys for watching. Bye.